Clarence Thomas has been in the news a lot for getting lots of presents and lots of money from billionaires, taking fancy trips, riding on private jets of billionaires who just, incidentally also happen to have Nazi memorabilia museums in their houses. But he has, for the first time, recused himself from a case involving the January 6th insurrection. Now, this is notable because he's been heavily criticized in the past for not recusing himself from January 6th related cases, despite his wife's participation in and her continuing contention that Donald Trump actually won the election, that the election was stolen, and she was implicated in some of the decisions in those cases. From NBC News, Thomas, under fire over claims of ethical lapses, had participated last year when the court rejected Trump's bid to prevent White House documents from being handed over to the House committee investigating January 6th. Now, I want to remind you that Thomas was the only justice who sided with Trump in that case. Incidentally, don't look too further into that. Or, his wife's involvement and implication in that case. But this case, not that one, but this one, which Thomas did recuse himself on, is about the emails of former Trump legal advisor and former law school professor John Eastman. The case also involved the now defunct January 6th committee, centering on the efforts by Eastman, a former law professor, to prevent his former employer, Chapman University of Orange, California, from handing over archived emails sent from or to Eastman's account. Now, Eastman was one of Justice Thomas's law clerks, which is why a lot of people believe he recused himself, although we can't know for sure why he did, because from NBC News, as is typical for justices, Thomas did not explain why he recused himself. In addition to Thomas's professional history with Eastman, another reason he might have stepped aside is that to some of the released emails reportedly mentioned Thomas as being the justice likely to be most receptive to Trump's arguments. Of course, they like to pretend that they are an independent branch, not bogged down by political biases. Of course, we know that that's fundamentally not true. These justices were appointed to the bench not in spite of their political activism, but because of their political activism, and because particularly Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Gorsuch, they knew that they were going to get favorable decisions coming from these justices. The conservatives did. So it's not surprising that they're talking about how he's going to be favorable to a Trump argument in these types of cases, or favorable towards, shielding their liability, or maybe even overturning the election, especially given that every night Justice Thomas goes home and lays in bed next to his election denying wife. And let's not pretend that, given the fact that we know she had unfettered access to his law clerks, that she doesn't have some sort of influence in the decisions he makes. Now, the Supreme Court, absent of Thomas in this case, decided not to hear Eastman's appeal. It was an obvious decision to make because the case was already moot. The January 6th committee got the emails. They received the emails, and now the January 6th committee is disbanded. They concluded their investigation, so it didn't matter anymore. And mootness is one of the reasons that the Supreme Court is not supposed to take on a case, so it was a no-brainer. So he got some good credit for recusing himself, but it really didn't matter because this was not a very consequential decision to be made. But let's talk a little bit about Eastman and who he is in the Trump cinematic universe, for those of you who might have forgotten. Eastman had pushed the discredited argument that then Vice President Mike Pence had the power to refuse to certify the 2020 presidential election results. He has also been indicted in connection with efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Eastman recently vouched for Thomas after various news reports alleged that the justices had fallen short of ethical standards. Separately, he faces disbarment proceedings in California over his role in the election. Yet another person who is willing to sacrifice everything they ever had in their life for the whims and the wishes of Donald Trump. But Senator Turner, I really think that we shouldn't give Clarence Thomas too much credit here, because this was an easy decision to recuse yourself from. And we'll get into in a minute a case that had a lot more significance that he didn't recuse himself from. But just what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, the same. This was nothing. He did absolutely nothing. He should get zero credit for this. And yeah, we know that pillow talk is real. I mean, that's really real. So his wife, I mean, how you laid out, yes, his wife, Eastman being one of his clerks in the past, is a reason to recuse himself, but he knew he had nothing to lose on this one because it wasn't going anywhere in the first place. So this is absolutely nothing done by Justice Clarence Thomas. And he's operating true to form, Rayyvana, and it's really very disappointing, not just him, but some other justices too, that they really do believe that they are above the law. And in some ways, hell, I mean, they have lifetime appointments. And so unless they're ever impeached, they're gonna be there till the wheels fall off. And it gives them more of a luxury to do what it is they want to do without fear of consequence. Because to get that consequence, it's a Herculean task to get a consequence, i.e. impeachment of United States Supreme Court justices, or anybody who has a lifetime appointment for that matter. I mean, Ray, as you know, as an attorney and others of our viewers may know, it's not just the United States Supreme Court judges that have lifetime appointments. There are courts right below the Supreme Court where judges have lifetime appointments. The judiciary needs to look at itself in the mirror. And I'm sure it would not like, if it was really critiquing itself, should not like what it is seeing right now. It is abhorrent the mockery that they are making of the United States Supreme Court. And Thomas is not the only one. He's just the most prevalent poster child at this moment, but he's not the only one.
And the support for the Supreme Court is at an almost all-time low right now. New polling shows.
Like Congress. Sorry, yeah. I had to throw that in there, but go ahead.
Not looking good for our branches of government.
No, not at all.
But what we're seeing more people demand a code of ethics for the Supreme Court justices that is strictly enforced. Even people on the bench, some of the liberal justices support this vehemently. So, we'll see developments in that. Of course, they don't want to police themselves when you're getting private flights from billionaires and you're allowed to not recuse yourself at any whim and help those billionaires.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.